This project consisted of a revamp of the Sereno senior living facility. It's an established property, but was due for a almost complete revamp. So we had the challenge to facilitate all the revamp portions. You know, that's always tricky with demolitions and tying into old versus new. You know, if you work on a new project, you are able to decide on the measurement. On a revamp, you need to either guess or go and measure the measurement. So that's quite challenging. That was the one side of the project, and the second part of the project was all of the public areas where the steel was mostly used as the decorative elements of the architectural design. So I think it's those two distinct roles we fulfilled on this project. And on the revamp portion, the steel work was again done in 3D shop drawings, and emphasis was placed to measure on site and update the shop drawings prior to manufacture, rather than to send the items to site and then cut and hack and weld on site. Where possible, we will always design in a either one connection is fixed on a beam and the other's got a sort of a sliding connection with a bit of play or a slotted hole. But the accuracy of the shop drawings was of immense importance. And then on the public facing sides, again, it was the architect's makeup for the project, and their special attention had to be placed on seamless connections. You know, really thinking about the aesthetical portions. And I think they also mentioned to you guys they followed this Meccano Lego kit of parts methodology, and then it's again, you know, how do you go about using angles and hollow sections? Hollow section is nice in compression because it's you know, it's got almost equal stress resistance in the X and the Y axis, but you can't really bolt it. And you know, what's the purest form in which to issue the connection? That's sort of the design thinking we had to apply there. And yeah, I think some of those structural elements or the architectural elements of the pergola even transcended down into forming benches, you know, so the structures are actually interactive with the public. And I think we don't often get projects where we can really strat our stuff alongside the architects. Normally it's just up there, cheap as possible and hidden by a ceiling. So I think this project we had the opportunity to showcase and support the architects.
I think Chris has covered
Yes.
I'm Hannes Wagner. I'm Chris's partner here at Structured Projects. And I think from a project management point of view on this key factor that Chris didn't clearly articulate was that the center was up and running already. So it's an existing facility, so we had to get in and out as quick as possible. So therefore the Meccano type design was more applicable to this specific building. And then also in terms of cladding mechanisms, a lot of the steel members were cladded with Rhino board and closed up so that you can't see it, just for speed of construction, so we can get in and out as quick as possible.
So I have enabled screen sharing if either of you wanted to share any models or photographs or anything like that. I do also have the photographs that were submitted as part of the entry. But can you give us a little bit of a brief description of what the project actually entails? What does the structural frame consist of, and which are the different parts? Just give us a bit more insight there.
I think this particular shot, this flyover a gatehouse is maybe the one picture in my career that's the closest to the render as ever. I think if you take the render, what was sold to the client and what was delivered after construction, this photo is probably the closest. And again, it's this roof, obviously, stability, you can slightly, or in the background behind the slat, see the bracing elements, but it actually cantilevered out of 4 stub columns situated on the guardhouse roof to aid with the stability. Also, there's a bracing elements in the sort of the vertical returns on this gatehouse, just to help with the stability of those 4 columns or 3 columns around the weak axis. Again, shop drawings, high level of detail, hiding the gutters inside, or hiding the gutters out of sight, and looking where to place the downpipes, to get the water out without having a ugly chroma deck downpipe cranking in an unsightly position. Now there's one of the resting spots. On this photo, you can see that where the benches actually cantilevers out of the structure. Even in the restaurant area, you have these benches coming out of the pergola's columns. Which I think is nice because it's actually an interaction between the public or the users and the structures. And we use those star angles as columns, and it was just a clean way to connect to the hollow sections. So a lot of these ideas came straight from the architect, and we just needed to make it work as close to their vision as possible. This photo shows sort of the pavilion and the sort of gym area and the ballroom area linking onto the bowls field, and you'll actually see those brick columns on the ends. That was actually the original brick column supporting the old face brick facades. And there it was important to accurately measure the distances and the asphalt positions of those brick columns to actually use them as supports for the new steel columns. Obviously, linking onto that, they are filled with concrete, but we couldn't rely on any moment connection where the steel and the bricks connect, and so we had to design the wind frame in that slatted system and the roof above. Even that pop out
I can maybe share a quick drawing just to indicate the sections that we used on that specific one.
Yes, and that roof also it consists in cross section of a sort of a kingpin design, and the kingpin was used as the truss, but also the kink, or the bottom of the kingpin was strategically used to pick up the facade line. So you've got
this
that.
This is where the facade line sit on grid line 2, and then this was the front portion as shown earlier in the image.
Yeah.
With the existing brick columns.
Yeah. So and there you also see the old wooden building at the back, and you also see there, we even had to create new skylights within the wooden structure for the smoke and the natural ventilation above the ballroom. We also used those big concrete beams to have the gym area column free, and the sort of the steel is obviously ideal for that, just because it's a more lightweight structure for the beam. So yeah, I think on a job like this, it's all about integrating the old and the new. And I think the architects really achieved that on this job. It really, it's got a real up-class modern vibe at the moment, and before the revamp it was really almost a mundane bare minimum facility.
Yeah, I see that Chris keeps getting these intricate jobs that require a lot of detailing. So did you also do the techland detailing yourselves in-house on this one, or was this done by the fabricator?
So interestingly enough, Sereno had 2 phases, but the one phase was actually the same contractor as the Waterberg project. So in this case, we didn't do the shop drawings ourselves, but we actually did use the same detailers. So it was the same guys, but the project setup was more conventional. Although it was equally important to get them on board timelessly, because the critical path actually ran through the structural work.
Yeah, yes, I asked that question because I'm wondering how you did the coordination of the survey with the detailing. If there was any digital coordination, or if that was done in a traditional way where it was primarily just you doing the translation.
Yeah. So we lately acquired some optical cameras to actually start to get those tines accurately. So we are heading in that direction. But on San Sereno, it was more labor intensive. So, I mean, back in the day, you could issue a side elevation and just note your plate thickness and your back mark, and the steel foreman was an artisan and he understood what you meant. But nowadays, I think in some cases the quality of labor and the quality of contractors are really diminishing. But luckily, we can make that up with the 3D detailing. So it is a big focus point for us in general, not linked to San Sereno. You know, one of the most frustrating things for me is that we issue, you get a concept and then you issue it to your own modelers, and then they issue it to the structural detailers, which is obviously an external party. And all along, everybody ever so slightly tweaks your original design intent. And I think we are aiming to, via technology, to pull that back so that you kind of do it only once, and that's enough to your liking as the design engineer.
And just again to answer it, the coordination was done, everything was in Revit, so the architects at the Revit, we had the existing survey, and most of the designs were done according to that.
So what were some of the challenges that you had on the job, Hannes, and how did you overcome them?
So challenges is always cost and time, so for these kind of jobs. So yeah, I mean, Chris mentioned everything previously, so I don't want to labor the point. It was just, the biggest challenge is always to get those Meccano sets right so that you can actually erect them on site. So sometimes it looks easy on a piece of paper, but it's not so easy on site with labor, and you are not able to get in big machinery to the erection. So that was a real workaround that we had to incorporate. Yeah, and I think just the noise factor as well. It is something that's not. I mean, it's a frail care old age home, if you can call it that, and then it's so it was really to limit the amount of noise in the construction time. I think that was unique to this project, other than any other.
Yeah, and as I think you mentioned a good point. So because the center was live, you only the day you hand over a specific portion to the contractor, that's the day, then he rips up the ceiling. Then that's the day you actually see what you're dealing with. So the clock is ticking on the info schedule from the very first day you actually get to see what you need to design. And, so that's tricky because your design time directly relates to construction time. So, and that's where we pre-designed the external elements and just focused on fast tracking that infill detailing after they've opened up.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I'm not the architect, but I can just speak for them. This whole development is a face brick, old day, red face brick type buildings, and they did a really good job in hiding the existing. So, I mean, we used a lot of the existing, but they hid it completely. So then we can look like a new building. So I think that they got right very well.
Just in terms of the actual fabrication and erection process, can you give us any more details on that?
Chris, I don't know if you want to go there.
Yeah. So, so I think, as we said, very important is accurate shop drawings, because it takes the thinking out of the process for the guys who needs to execute. That is key. Being erected between existing buildings without access, there's ramps, there's water features, there's all sorts of funny things. The way we broke down the parts into that elemental design enabled the guys to actually carry it in and to erect it with nice, beautiful connections without, having unsightly welds and things like that on site. And obviously the portion that we did over that, overlooking the bowls field, there was more traditional erection with a girder supporting the kingpin truss, supporting onto the concrete columns below. So decouple your structural elements and enable more hand-related work for this project.
Good. So then, just lastly from my side, and then maybe Emmanuel and John Duncan might have another question before we close. What are you most proud of on this project? What do you think went really well? Hannes, do you want to kick off with that and then hand over to Chris?
Yeah, I think as Chris said, everything looks like the render. So, I mean, we can send you photos of the rendered pictures prior and then the actual photos afterwards. And that's just something that stood out. You don't normally get that. And it's also another unique thing, sorry, Chris, is the elements that we used. You'll see that on the photos. It's all custom designed elements. It's not your traditional just using a parallel flange channel. It was all angles with hollow sections in between to make it more modular, lighter to construct. So that was really unique.
Yeah, I would say for me is the execution. I think it's very rare that we get contractors nowadays that actually execute to the required level. And I think this job was one of them where they, proof is in the detail, and I think the guys pulled through from render to finish.
Good. Emmanuel, any questions before we close?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
You mentioned that the as the thing goes away from you, details change. Your intention gets lost. What sort of intention? Where were the hiccups there?
Okay, so that comment was definitely not related to Sereno, but say for instance, you design a big span roof on a shopping center, and you are particular in terms of where you place the connection because the forces are maybe smaller. There's a certain way you would like your bracing plates or your bracing members connecting to your columns, SOPs. We tend to, or we aim to think of the erection and the maintenance, not just the design when we design. And I think a huge problem is that there's a lot of young guys that gets hold of a Tekla license, and it's just guns away. They don't look at how we tell them to space weld the trusses, top and bottom chords. They flip around the diagonals. They they don't stick to proper structural principles like SOPs. They miss those key things that makes the project work, like ensuring that the last purlin sits just enough or just close enough to a wall to actually not have the sheet bent on the end. I can really go on and on, but I think where it became very imminent was I think we had 3 consecutive cash builds and shop drawings on 3 malls, and I mean, apart from the wind clause, it's a copy paste, same eaves heights, same box heights, and I promise you every single box looks different, and that's the detailers that doesn't stick to what they need to do, and it's not always wrong, but there's an immense amount of communication that needs to go in to convey what you think as an engineer to actually to have it manifest on site, and I think that gets lost along the way. It's like sending a paper through a copy machine. By the 3rd time you can still read it, but it gets a little bit off. But but that's the game.
So, okay, well, the way you mentioned that the contractors are less than competent. Now we're talking the detailers are less than competent. So I think that maybe the engineers should be willing to take on the detailing themselves, or at least do more in terms of in the model that they work on. Give the information there that is needed. The other thing is you're managing the project in Revit. Do you have any difficulty with the IFC transfer from Tekla, let's call it?
Yeah, John, I think you are spot on, and I think we still acknowledges that we also need to give that amount of training to the detailers and the contractors. I understand they're not necessarily engineers, but we've got we certainly have an emphasis to start and take the modeling either in Revit or in the new Tekla packages as far as possible before we hand it over. Obviously, if you take on the full detailing, then you sit with a responsibility that you're not necessarily getting paid for in the current typical project plan, and also you need to buy additional software, which is very expensive. But I know that the new Tekla package, you can take it. You can take it almost just before you generate your cutting lists with your normal detailing package, and then the detailers can actually just take over and get the part lists right. So I think we're working towards a point where we try to answer those issues.
Who were the
Honest?
detailers?
Yes,
Who were
I
the
think,
detailers?
sorry?
Who were the detailers?
On
On
San
this
Sereno?
one.
I or you?
No, it was Etienne and Jandre.
Chandra.
What all? Yeah,
Genre. Yes.
SMC drafting. Yes.
yes.
Sorry, what was that?
Chandra.
What
Chandra and
was
Etienne. Etienne is the owner and the company name is SMC Drafting.
SMC drafting? All right. Yeah, look,
So-
it's a problem. It is a problem. There are people that you don't have this whole system of having leaders who look after the juniors, and the juniors eventually become the leaders, and then eventually become the going officers. It's a different system. And unfortunately, I know exactly what you're talking about. They rely on the standards that are in the software. They don't tweak them to what you want.
Yes, we've got about 6 minutes or so just to wrap up. I see that we've got Walter on the line with us as well. I just want to maybe give Walter an opportunity to comment on the architectural brief for San Sereno, and then maybe just what you think went particularly well and what you're proud of on this project.
Yes, perfect. So sorry so much for missing basically the meeting, but we got the time wrong. We had it as 2:30. But okay, so the San Sereno. So I think the essence of the project was to transform this extremely old, dilapidated, institutional senior living estate into a new facility that would put the residents first. And essentially our brief from the client was to create a comfortable environment for residents to live in, and to actually, the approach was that the new communal facility would become an extension of the living room of the individual houses of the residents. So the existing building was extremely institutional. There was massive roof structures, and it just didn't have a nice atmosphere when you walked around there. And our approach was to bring in more natural light, to allow for the spatial organization of the various spaces to work better, and to make it universally accessible for all the residents. So we had seamless transitions in the different floor surfaces so that you can access the different spaces, and so that the spaces are interconnected. And then we also, initially the administration facility and the offices actually had the best view over the bowling green. And what we did is to invert that, to give that back to the residents. So that became the area that the coffee shop was located in. And that was where you had the amazing view over the bowling green. And then, I think the big thing, do you want to add?
Yes, I think so. In terms of the brief as well, due to the fact that it was a live site, we had quite a difficulty in terms of senior residents living on site and in the premises. The total brief was to transform this building, but at the same time being sensitive towards it being a live site. So we had to come up with a solution to firstly address noise reduction on site. Quicker program, construction program, rather than a 12-month program, we had to look at a 7 or 8 month program. And the only way we could actually achieve that with the accuracy that we wanted to achieve in terms of the detailing of the project was to make use of this Meccano set that was pre-manufactured, pre-treated, assembled on site, and then only painted. And I think that was the success of the project, where the lightweight component actually translated into the contemporary approach of giving that old institutional building that new, fresh look. But apart from that, achieving the inclusive design approach. So we could actually, with lightweight structures, create that golden thread between different areas to link that with the pergolas, to extend from the existing footprint, the building, to the outside, to actually bring in filtered natural light, more ventilation. We could level out the level differences in the existing building for someone who is physically impaired to actually have that smooth transition between spaces. It also created the concept of path finding, where you know where the actual, call it clip on the Meccano set construction approach is that's your way finding. So you would then navigate between the library to the lounge underneath the pergola structure. But at the same time, seeing that it is a senior living estate, is the distances were reduced with pause areas. And the fact that we used the steel also created the opportunity for us to actually cantilever the lightweight steel and timber benches from the columns, so that as a resident, if you walk, you can actually then have that moment of pause prior to going to the call it the next target or the next location. And that really assisted with the residents actually starting to describe the design. The one resident actually said it's like living on a cruise boat or a cruise ship. And because of the fact that it was easy to navigate. It is, you know where to go, you know where the toilets are, you know where the restaurant is, you know where the entrance is. And I think that's what was lacking from the building as you approached, is we designed the new entrance gates together with structure to actually allow for a big span and have this welcoming feature saying you have arrived at this estate. And from there, going to the parking area, the pergolas already started at the parking, where if a visitor parks, you can actually wait at the pergola. The pergola navigates you into going to the concierge. From the concierge, opening up all those spaces allowed you to already know where you want to go. Is it the coffee shop? Is it the wellness? Is it the restaurant? And that helped with people realizing that it actually makes it easier to make use of the functions which the building is designed for. It's supposed to be the extension of your lounge. You're supposed to have your family over rather in the communal facility and not at your small unit.